Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about boot camps. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, I'm a big fan of your episodes. Thank you for contributing to the community in such a nice way. I myself am a 8-month bootcamp graduate and started with a 6-month internship in a corporate company 3 years ago. Currently I'm working as a mid-level front-end engineer in another corporation. I often get the impression from your episodes, including this one, that you are a bit opinionated about bootcamp graduates in a way that most of them are not good enough. I might be wrong in that, please correct me if I'm misunderstood, but I think that may discourage people from continuing in their career journey. Could you clarify on this? I believe that I would get another really beneficial output from this, and as I get from most of your episodes. Thanks in advance. No worries. So I think that my term is I usually say bootcamp level developer. So it's just a term that I use. It's not. I don't think it's an official term because I really don't know another way of describing it. It's a term that refers to not if you took a boot camp, if you graduated through a boot camp, or if you studied at university. It has to do with your depth and your width, basically how mature are you in your knowledge of software development. So what I'm referring to is, as I said, not that you went to a university, because there are bootcamp level developers that, they went to university, they have master's degrees, like the super fancy degrees and so forth. And then there are non-bootcamp developers who went and took a bootcamp and have been working for quite a few years. What it is more referring to is that you are very limited, from my point of view, in your understanding of the overall ecosystem that you find yourself in. So an example of a bootcamp level developer would be, if in this case you're referring to front end, right? So if I asked you, say an example, do you know what a media query is? And you don't, and I ask you, why don't you know about that? How do you work with it? And you tell me that the reason is because you only worked with, say, styled components or some CSS and JS solution or some framework that does that thing for you. That is, to me, telling me that you learned all that you needed to know about CSS from a single bootcamp somewhere. And that bootcamp taught you a single technique that only really works if you're dealing with that specific stack to do this. Now, the thing that you don't most likely know if you are a bootcamp level developer is that the range of tools that you have to know is in front end can vary quite a bit, because even within the same suite, almost like the main tools, there are many ways of, say, dealing with CSS. Not everybody is using, say, style components. Not everybody is just using SCSS, which is like the default, like everybody uses that practically, or SAS or SCSS usually. And so when I ask you about the stacks that you've been using and what flavors you are familiar with, what I'm looking for is, do you actually know how CSS works? Because the CSS and JS solution versus SAS and so forth, these are just different tools for you to actually deal with CSS. But if you don't know how they work, or you don't know the underlying technology that actually makes it work, that's a problem, because these are just wrappers on top of that thing. And so if I'm interviewing you for a role and I can hear that, well, number one, you don't know this specific stack. That's not a deal breaker if I can hear that, yeah, no, I haven't worked with, say, for example, this specific framework that we're using. But I've been doing A, B, and C in, in some other thing and so forth. And I hear that your knowledge is actually pretty mature. So you understand the underlying concept. You understand how to do this, which means that I can trust that if I get you into this project here, where some of the tools are completely new to you, like so forth, it's not a problem. You're going to pick up that like nothing, because you have a mature understanding of the technology. It's very similar to, I've said this before to you guys, where if you learn one programming language, it's usually easy for you to transition to another one. And after the more you learn, at a certain level, when you get to a certain skill level, it doesn't really matter which programming language you know since before, because you've coded for so many years, or for your skill is at a level where we can put you on any language, and you will maybe not know the syntax right off the bat, but you will be able to start working very quickly. This is not a bootcamp level developer. This is an individual with mature understanding of technology and all the tools surrounding the ecosystems that they find themselves in. A bootcamp level developer is not that. It is a person who will choke if they don't have the tool suite that they are looking for, or they're going to be blocked by the fact that they may not have a basic understanding of concepts that these more in-depth developers have. And that has nothing to do with your background, if you went to university or not. In many cases, bootcamp level a bootcamp is what you need. That's the only real way to become a front-end developer today. That's the closest thing to an official education you can get. And so this is not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to that, as I can tell you from experience, I've interviewed people with 12, 20, up to 20 years of experience. I think that's the highest number I was ever told. And they're supposed to have been working with front-end forever and ever, right? And they can't tell me even basic things about what a promise is, how does async away work. As I said, CSS is usually a big one. Do you know how CSS works? They apply for roles for different frameworks, and I go a classic one is they apply for a React role, and I ask, can you tell me what is a hook? What does use effect do? Could you tell me when do you use effect and when do you use state? And they have no idea. This is literally on the first getting started React page on the React website. And so I go, okay, this is clearly not in your bootcamp. This is a person who is lacking knowledge. This is not a deal breaker, but if you take a holistic picture of the thing, if they're lacking in basic knowledge about HTML, or say semantic HTML, or things like that, they're lacking in understanding of basic concepts within how JavaScript works and how you work with JavaScript. They lack in basic CSS knowledge, and they don't know the framework. This is a bootcamp level developer. It's an individual who I've even talked to people who say, I asked them about CSS, and they say, no, I don't really use all that much of any other CSS. I just use Tailwind for everything because that's the one I know. And I go, great. Go and work for. Then if we were using Tailwind in this company, we could have used you maybe. But when the requirements are, we need someone who is a stable software developer who can sort of get with the times and adapt to changes in tooling, or something they are a little bit more flexible. This is not you. This is a bootcamp level developer. It's the same thing for, I will even go as far to say that almost every junior is a bootcamp level developer by default, because you haven't had enough years of experience and enough exposure to a lot of stuff to learn more ways of doing things, or the different flavors of things and pros and cons and so forth. It takes a while to get there. And usually when I hear this sort of when I refer to it with someone who is really supposed to be quote unquote senior, what's happened is that they've done that thing I've told you guys that is dangerous. They stagnated too early. And that's not always a deal breaker. In front end, it's actually you find it interesting because the industry's understanding of good front end development is so low that most of these people get by. But for the companies who really know that this is an issue, and that a lot of front end projects turn into absolute shit and has quality issues and architectural issues and so forth, these people are not good enough, because, as I said, they just learned the bare minimum usually of what they needed in order to start working, and then they just stayed at that level. They never poked around, tried out more ways of doing things, etc., etc. So they haven't really grown much since the early days of their career. That's what I'm referring to when I talk about a bootcamp level developer. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't have a single problem with a bootcamp level developer. I've hired many over the years, and I've dismissed university students for the same reason, and that is that when you work in software, you have to understand that the tooling, they can change, the environments can change, and sometimes you have to do things that may not be exactly the thing that you did at the last company or in that specific course you took or something like that. You have to be able to be a little bit flexible. And so when I talk about bootcamp level developers, I'm referring to a person who basically just has a fairly narrow understanding of a very basic set of tools. And outside of that, they're sort of lost. They don't know exactly what they're doing. I've had what I call fairly extreme cases where, people don't know even the most fundamental things, in my opinion, even after years of working. And that is very simply because they took a boot camp or like some basic they have some basic education in how to do, say, front-end development, and then they were done. Like, that's it. Like, they don't grow after that. And sure, there are companies who need that basic set of skills just to produce the code. That's not a problem. But in many cases, when, say, I need to hire someone for like more serious large-scale development, I need to find a person who I can trust has a deep enough understanding of the actual technologies that are involved in development, so that I can tell them, hey, go and set up that product over there, figure out the documentation, like do all these sort of things, and get that thing working with a decent architecture, a decent setup, stable sort of thing for long-term development, which we can scale to more than one project. Do you have any idea how rare that is to find in front-end? It is as finding a unicorn with one blue eye and one brown eye. That's how difficult it is. And I can count on my 5 fingers how often I find someone. Like, if we're lucky, you find someone who can do that, sort of, if they get some guidance and so forth. And if you are maybe on my 5 fingers I can count how many times I've found an actual front-end developer who has a deep enough understanding that they can handle that, plus the pipelines and all this sort of stuff, because some companies require you to have that knowledge, because they don't have a person who only knows CSS, a person who only knows React and only knows these things and so forth. There's a range of things. And bootcamp level developers, they will usually do really well if they have someone with that sort of knowledge who sort of helps them set everything up so they can just focus on the coding, just as a junior level software developer. But for some roles that you're looking for, the term senior, well, senior means, as I like to call them, real senior, not bootcamp level senior. Have a great day.